$2.3 million in a storage unit, under a tarp, behind a broken refrigerator, in a unit your father paid cash for every month for 11 years and never once mentioned. That's where this starts. Not with an email, not with a phone call, with a padlock you're cutting off with bolt cutters because the funeral home needs the storage receipt and nobody else has a key. The lock falls to the concrete floor. You pull the door up. Dust, a stack of moving boxes, an old recliner, with the stuffing coming out, and behind all of it, wrapped in contractor bags and duct tape, 11 Rubbermaid totes stacked to the ceiling. You open the first one expecting Christmas decorations. It's cash, not loose, banded, $10,000 a stack, wrapped in the kind of rubber bands post offices use, stacked 11 totes deep. You open a second tote to make sure the first wasn't some strange isolated thing. It isn't. It's the same, band after band, tote after tote. You don't call anyone, not your mother, 3 exits away at her kitchen table planning a funeral on a fixed income and a Social Security survivor's benefit she's already worried won't cover the mortgage. Not your sister, who thinks dad died with $1,100 in checking and a truck that needs a transmission. You stand in a storage unit in Fresno at 6:40 on a Tuesday evening, and you do the only math that makes sense to you in that moment. You count. $2,300,000, give or take 40,000. You don't bother recounting a third time, in cash. In a storage unit your father rented under a business name, Wheeler Diversified Holdings, that doesn't exist anywhere except on the storage contract and a P.O. box across town. Your father drove a delivery route for 26 years. Beer distribution, mostly grocery stores and dive bars, 6 a.m. Starts, home by 3. He coached your Little League team for 4 years running. He wore the same 3 flannel shirts on rotation for as long as you can remember. He clipped coupons. He drove a truck with 210,000 miles on it until the day he died. Nothing about that life explains this. You call a locksmith the next morning, not the police, not a lawyer, not your mother a locksmith, because you need to change the unit's access code before anyone else who might have a key shows up. You tell yourself you're protecting the money until you understand where it came from. You know, even as you say it to yourself, that this is the first lie you're building the rest of this on. The funeral is 4 days later, standing at the front of a half-full chapel, shaking hands with people who worked the same delivery routes as your father for 2 decades. You keep thinking about 11 totes stacked in a storage unit 40 minutes away. Your mother stands beside you in a black dress she bought for her own mother's funeral 18 years ago, thanking people for coming, and you watch her do quiet math about the mortgage in her head between condolences. Somebody mentions what a simple, honest man your father was, and you nod, and you don't correct them, because as far as you know, standing there, that might still be true. You could end that math right now, the mortgage math, the worry on her face. You don't. It takes 6 weeks to find out where the money came from. Your Uncle Dennis, your father's younger brother, the one nobody in the family has spoken to in 11 years over a dispute nobody quite remembers the origin of anymore, shows up at the funeral wanting to know if you found the unit. You tell him you don't know what he's talking about. He doesn't believe you, and he's right not to. He corners you 3 weeks later at a gas station, of all places, both of you filling up at the same row of pumps like it's coincidence, though you suspect it isn't. Wheeler Diversified Holdings, he tells you, wasn't your father's business. It was a numbers operation, Dennis, and your father ran together in the 80s and 90s, small stakes sports betting, run out of 2 bars and a barber shop, before online gambling made it obsolete, and both of them quietly walked away from it around 2004. Dennis got out with almost nothing, he says, watching your face carefully while he says it. Your father, it seems, did not. You don't tell him what you found. You don't confirm or deny anything. You pay for your gas and drive away with your hands tight on the wheel, and you spend the entire 40-minute drive home deciding that whatever Dennis thinks he's owed for that information, you're not the one who's going to pay it. You don't tell your mother any of this. Not the numbers operation, not Dennis's version of events, not the specific number sitting in a storage unit 40 minutes from her house. You tell her dad had some savings she didn't know about, a phrase vague enough to be technically true and specific enough to end the conversation before she asks a follow-up question. You don't want to answer. You hire an attorney 2 states away, deliberately, someone with no connection to anyone in your family, a tax attorney named Priya Chandrasekaran, who specializes in exactly the kind of quiet money problem you're describing, without describing it too precisely. She doesn't ask where the cash came from. She tells you that's deliberate. Some attorneys don't want to know, because not knowing is its own kind of protection. What she does ask is whether any of it can be traced to an identifiable illegal transaction still within a statute of limitations. You tell her, as far as you know, no, it's old money from a business that dissolved 2 decades ago. She tells you that's the difference between a serious problem and a complicated one, and that the difference matters more than people think. The plan she lays out takes 4 months to execute. Structured deposits, never large enough on their own to trigger a currency transaction report, spread across 3 different institutions over careful intervals. A portion declared as a gift from an estate, taxed accordingly, generating a paper trail that will hold up if anyone ever asks. The rest moved into an LLC you set up specifically to hold it, invested conservatively, the kind of account that generates modest quarterly statements nobody would ever look twice at. Some weeks, it feels less like wealth management and more like a second, quieter job. There are receipts to keep, deposit slips to log, a spreadsheet on a laptop that never leaves your house, time-stamped and backed up in a way Priya insists on, even though you don't fully understand why, until she explains, calmly, that the paper trail has to survive you being asked about it 5 years from now, just as well as it survives being asked about it today. You start to understand that money like this doesn't just sit there. It has to be managed the way a secret is managed, carefully, continuously, with the assumption that someone, someday, might ask a question you need an answer for. Your mother gets $40,000 from the estate savings story, enough to cover a year of mortgage payments and take some pressure off. She thinks that's most of what there was. She cries when you give it to her and says your father always found a way to take care of things quietly, and you sit with that sentence longer than you expect to. Your sister gets $15,000 toward the truck repair and doesn't ask where it came from because she's never had reason to think there was more. You sit across from her at her apartment the day you give it to her, and she hugs you and says, "Dad always did look out for people quietly," and you let her believe that's exactly what this is. She asks, almost as an afterthought, if there's more where that came from. You tell her no. It's the second lie, and it comes easier than the first one did. You keep $2,100,000, minus Priya's fees, minus what you've already given away, sitting quietly in an account neither of them knows exists. You think about Dennis sometimes, the version of your father's brother who walked away from the same operation with nothing, who's shown up twice now, asking careful, half-joking questions about the unit that you've deflected both times. You don't know what he actually knows, or what he thinks he's owed for knowing it. You've started, without quite deciding to, keeping a mental list of what you'd say if he ever asked directly. You still don't have an answer you'd be comfortable giving, and some nights that bothers you more than the money itself does. You drive past the storage facility sometimes, on your way somewhere else. It's just a storage facility now. You closed the unit 8 months after that first night, moved everything out over 3 visits, spread across 2 weeks, so no single trip looked unusual on the facility's camera log, something Priya suggested almost as an afterthought, that you've thought about more than you'd like to admit since. Your mother still doesn't know the real number. She thinks her husband of 31 years left behind $40,000 in savings she didn't know about, a modest, private man's modest, private secret. She has no idea the actual number was 57 times that, sitting in a storage unit under a name that wasn't his, built from a business he never once mentioned in 3 decades of marriage. Some nights you rehearse telling her, just to see how the words would sound out loud. You never get past the first sentence. You know now that the version of your father you grew up with, the flannel shirts, the beer route, the Little League games, was real. It just wasn't the whole story. And the part of you that decided your mother should keep believing in the whole story instead of the real one isn't entirely about protecting her anymore. Some of it, you're starting to admit, is about not having to explain why you didn't tell her the moment you found out and what that decision, sitting quietly for months before you acted on it, actually says about you. You still don't have an answer for that either. You're not sure you want one. You think, sometimes, about the 11 totes stacked in that unit, wrapped in contractor bags like something meant never to be found. Your father kept that secret for over a decade, without a single slip, no strange purchase, no late-night phone call overheard, nothing that ever gave your mother a reason to ask a question. You used to think that kind of discipline was just who he was, quiet and steady in everything. Now you wonder if it was something he learned to do on purpose, year after year, the same way you're learning to do it now, and whether, somewhere down the line, someone will find something of yours the way you found his.